Hello, I'm Kyle Chong, and today I will be going over how to bake a particle system in 3ds Max for use in Unity. We'd want to do this to reduce the processor load of having to simulate the same particle system over and over again within Unity itself. So here I have a weighted companion cube, and I'm going to make hearts come out of one of its faces. So let's begin by going to particle systems, followed by particle flow source, and turning on auto grid so we can place our flow source directly on the face of the cube. And now we can scrub forward to check out how the particles look. These are actually just position indicators, and it appears that the particles are flowing in the wrong direction. So let's fix that by rotating our flow source. And now the particles are being emitted out of the cube. We can alter the particle system itself by going to the Modify panel, and under Particle Flow Source, choose Particle, and Particle View. And here in Event are the various operators that are modifying the particle system. Birth modifies when it begins and stops. So if we have a negative value in emit start, such as -40, and we scrub to the beginning of the system, we can see that particles have already been emitted from the source. But let's leave that at 0 and have our particles end at 100, which is when our timeline ends currently. Amount is the number of particles that are going to be emitted throughout the lifespan of the system, and we can also modify that as a rate. For now, let's reduce the number of particles down to 100 or so. To see what the particles actually look like, you would have to change the display type from text to geometry. And now we can see that this is a cube, which is what the shape of our particles are. Since we want hearts, we can modify that to hearts. And it looks like they're a little large right now, so let's reduce their size down to 6 or so. And if we play our animation, we can see hearts being shot out of our cube. These hearts seem to be moving a bit too quick, so we can reduce their speed by going to the speed operator and reducing their speed down to, say, 50 or so. That looks a bit too slow, so maybe 100. And now we can see the hearts distinctly. These other operators are all things you can add to the event, such as delete. And if we do that, it deletes all of the particles. So let's change that so it only deletes particles that are 3/4 of the way through their lifespan. Another useful operator that you may use in 3ds Max is material static and material dynamic. Material static is a material that does not change throughout the lifespan of the particle, whereas dynamic is the opposite. However, we won't be using these because materials added through these operators will not persist when we bake our particle system into a mesh. So for now, we'll leave that alone. Now let's add some forces to our particle system. Go back to the Create panel and go to Space Warps. We can add a force such as wind, say, right there or so. So this wind is pointing up. However, if we play our animation, the wind does not appear to be doing anything, and that's because we haven't applied the force operator to our particle system. So if we go back to the particle system, we can modify it so that wind acts upon the particle system. But we have to add the wind first. So let's do that by going to list and choosing our wind. Now we can see that our particles are being forced upward by the wind. Perhaps a bit too strongly. So we can also modify the wind itself by going to the wind object. And here we can see they have a strength field, which we can reduce down to, say, 0.5 or so. And the particles are not forced as strongly as before. We can also change the type of wind to a spherical wind, and we can see now that the hearts are being blown up as if the wind was a sphere. That's a pretty interesting effect, so I'm pretty happy with it. One change we have to make before we bake the particle system into a mesh is to move the flow source deeper into the cube. Because when the particles are turned to meshes, their initial position is actually right outside that flow source, as you can see. And when we bake it, these meshes will all appear right outside the cube, which is a little unsightly. So let's move the flow source into the cube so their initial position is actually inside of the cube. So that should be good. And now we can still see the particles coming out. Though they appear to be flowing a little too strongly, so we should reduce the strength of our wind again. Maybe a little more than that. Like this. That looks good. Now we can finally bake our particle system into a mesh. We do so by using a free Max script. So let's drag this Max script in, and you can see it's called Particle Flow Baker. We can change the range in which it bakes the animation, but since our animation spans the entirety of our time segment, we can just leave it as active time segment. And we don't need to change any of these other options, so just press bake now. Now we can see that it has created a mesh and animated them every single frame as the step size is 1. So now that these hearts are meshes, we can apply material to them. And we can do so by selecting all of these. So as we see, each of these has a mesh, and applying a material. So opening our material editor, we can use one of these materials that we already have and just assign the material to all of the meshes. And as we can see, they now all have that material. And now we're essentially done. We can export this, save it to our desktop. We don't need any special options here, but you do want to bake the animation. So choose animation as well as bake animation. And make sure your up axis is the up, and export. So now that it's on our desktop, we can bring it into Unity. It's a standard scene, flat terrain. We have a camera pointing down at the terrain. So import our asset. And have it fix its scale, make sure it's getting its materials correctly, found the materials. So we can bring it into our scene now. It's right in the middle. And if we play our scene, we can see the animation is now coming out as desired. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have fun playing with 3ds Max and Unity.